I really struggled to know, what did that mean? How do you rejoice when dark times come? Mm-hmm. And the dark times didn't just come once, they came over and over again. And somebody asked me once, how you doing? And I just slipped out of my mouth. I said, I'm learning to dance in the darkness. And I didn't mean it as a dance of joy, that seemed ridiculous, but it was more getting on the dance floor, movement, keeping on going, keeping on turning up. And so that sat with me for a long time and ended up being the title of the book.
And, you know, you really did go through so many hard things, you know, and I think sometimes when you're in a season of trial, like one thing is enough, like the loss of your wife to cancer, that's enough for a lifetime, but things kept happening. So can you just give us a sense of kind of what you went through?
Yeah, sure. So after my wife was diagnosed with cancer and passed away, I kind of felt like in the back of my mind there was an idea that if I handled this well, if I kept my eyes on God, then everything would work out. Mm. And that was, I don't know where I got that idea from, because it didn't work out. And so there was a series of events, year after year after year, that continued to threaten my well-being, my health, my faith. And so I remarried. Surprisingly, I hadn't even had a coffee with someone, and I remarried a few years later, and I thought this was going to be the answer and it was going to be a healing time. And we faced some catastrophic emotional health issues that was a real surprise to us. And so this was, in some ways, an even darker shade of black, and it got harder and harder. And that marriage ended after many years. My heart was broken again. But then during that time, there was more events. My son, who was just a fantastic young man, an 18-year-old that loved God, just a wonderful young man, he was romancing his girlfriend. He took her out, he cooked her a beautiful meal on the hills overlooking the city where I live, and a flame was caught by some oil that flicked, and it hit the grass, and the entire hill went up. And the whole of this city was looking up at this bushfire. Streets were blocked off, and I got a phone call that my son had been arrested for starting a bushfire. And so in the midst of dealing with a marriage that was deteriorating and really struggling, I get this phone call that my son is going to be potentially facing jail for lighting a bushfire. And so for a year we're in and out of court, we're on TV, and eventually they said, look, this was not why we had the law for this, so we're going to exonerate him. He's gone, and go, oh, phew, now I can relax. The sun's going to come out again. And then I got diagnosed with cancer. And so I'm battling my own form of cancer, and I have my surgery, and they say, we got it, you're all clear. And you go, oh, praise God, it's fantastic. And it was only a few short months later that I went back in for a checkup, and they said, we didn't get it, it's spread. And so we had to go through a whole range of treatment and hope for the future and pray to God and say, please heal me. So we go through that, and they say now that they've now got it, and you go, oh, now I can relax. And then I'm out riding my bicycle one day, just having a wonderful bike through the Adelaide Hills, and out of nowhere a car hits me. And I wake up, I'd come off my bike and I'd gone straight into a huge gum tree, and I'd cracked my collarbone, my ribs, and so that took months to recover from, but it was the brain injury that was the biggest problem. And so for a year I battled that, and at the end of that year I was no better. And the doctor said, look, take a whole month off. I want you to take a whole month and just do nothing. And let's just see if your brain kicks back in. So at the end of that month, I was pretty distressed because I was no better. Mm. So I thought, I'm going to go back to the specialist. And the specialist said, look, that's what we were concerned about. It's a traumatic brain injury. It's permanent. You need to reduce stress in your life. So I left the office going, how am I going to do that? And the next morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, my kids came running down the stairs from upstairs saying, Dad, the house is on fire. So I ran outside and there's 50 people banging on the window, get out, get out. And 2 minutes later, the roof collapsed onto the beds, and the kids would have been killed if we'd been in the house. And so I stood there watching as the house burned down, and the memories and all of those things. And I went, this is ridiculous. And so life went on again, a couple more years. And then my daughter, who'd started as a 7-year-old praying for her mother that God would heal her mother, and watched her die. Now she had to pray for her then-to-be husband, who'd been diagnosed with cancer himself. So she marries him, the cancer spreads. I had the privilege of standing at their wedding and marrying them, and then 3 months later standing at his funeral and saying goodbye. Wow. So we have this series of events that has really knocked us around and caused us to face that dilemma that everyone faces. Am I going to turn to God in the darkness, or am I going to turn away from him?
Yeah, I talked about that one decision that you made. So what was that one decision that's carried you through all of this?
Well, it goes back to when I first became a Christian at 18. I met a God who said, give me your life and trust me. And that's what I did. And so I said naively, back then, God, here's my life. I'm going to trust you no matter what. Now, I had different ideas of what that no matter what would look like, but it turned out to be a series of events that I didn't want and I didn't plan and I couldn't do anything about. But I kept coming back to that. I am going to trust my God no matter what. I didn't understand it. I was disappointed at times. I was frustrated. I was angry at times. But I said, I'm going to keep going back to God no matter what happens in life. And so people say, oh, you're amazing. And I said, no, this is a decision I made. God's been amazing. He's carried me through. He hasn't done the things that I wanted him to do all the time, but he's carried me through. And I'm going to keep testifying to the goodness of God, even if it doesn't look like there's a lot of good in that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about reframing things as well, right? You could say, oh, my house burned down, that's terrible. You could say, oh, we were all saved, we could have died.
Yeah.
Or I got cancer, that's terrible, but I'm still alive, that's good,
Yeah.
right? So it's always mixed. And you talk in the book about moments of joy or peace from God, even in the midst of hardship, but you also talk about deep moments of loneliness. So how do you navigate those kinds of things in view of your commitment to God?
Yeah, so there is a lot of things, and I never want to sugarcoat what we went through. I don't want to pretend, oh, now I'm so much stronger because of this, and God was great because of this. There was a lot of dark nights of the soul. There was a lot of loneliness. When my wife was battling cancer, she was sick a lot of the time, and she'd go to bed early, and I'd put the kids to bed, and there I am alone. And in the months that followed, once she passed away, I'm alone again, and I'm disconnected now. I had to give up my work. I'm looking after kids. Relationships had changed. The dynamic in relationships or family had changed. And so I had to work out, God, are you orchestrating all of this, or are you present with me in it? And I chose that he's present with me in it. And I said, so I can only take a step at a time at the moment, and I'm going to trust you each step of the way. And I think sometimes we do spiritual acrobatics to absolve God of responsibility. He did this because he wants to do that. Sometimes there's just the unknown, and you just have to walk one step at a time and say, God, I believe in the truth of your word, that you are true, that you are caring, that you are loving, that you are kind, and I'm going to trust that. And the circumstances around me, that's not going to change that. And so this was a decision of the will, but it wasn't always easy.
I can't only imagine how tough it's been. One of the things you talk about in the book, which I really loved, is this community around you, people who are praying for you and your wife all over the world. What difference did that make, not intentionally isolating yourself in pain?
It's one of the things that I've learned in doing a podcast that I'm doing now is everybody's saying the same thing. While the journey is really difficult, it's made that much easier if you don't isolate yourself and you actually reach out and you accept the love that comes from community. And so to me, there were people all over the world were sending us messages. And there were sometimes I'd be praying and feeling that loneliness, and a message would come in. And I began to use this phrase that you need a God with skin on. And where he turns up through the knocking of the door and somebody's turned up and said, hey, I just wanted to pop over and see if I can sit with you for a while and have a coffee. You go, oh, that's exactly what I needed. Or somebody who sends you something, or somebody just drops a meal off and says, just passing, I just wanted to give you a meal, I thought the kids would enjoy this. And I began to, instead of looking up all the time going, where are you, God? I began to look around and say, you're everywhere. And that's the community he gives us, that we're part of something. And that's why I'd say making sure that you let others know you're hurting. Because sometimes we expect people to read our mind and go, where are they? But I need to be open and say, I'm struggling. I need some, can you just pop over and hang out with me? And that's really important. And that's what I'm hearing from others as I ask them the same questions.
One of the things, and I have to say, not everybody did it perfectly. Just, so people understand, like, sometimes people don't know what to do. Sometimes they say and do the wrong thing.
They do.
And you were very gracious toward people for that, which I really appreciate. But one of the things that you do now is taking that pain. Like you wrote very honestly in here, not so much preaching, but just so that people would get it, that you've been there, that you really suffered, and that they could relate in their own suffering or whatever they're going through. And now you've turned that into a podcast, Resilient Souls. So you're actually journeying with other people who are hurting. Tell me about that.
So I was really reluctant to write a book because I thought, who am I to write a book? I'm just an ordinary guy. But I really decided I didn't want to waste the pain. And if this could help others, so I started to write this. But as it came to the end, I went, this is just my story. This is just my personality, my view of the world, my theology, my background, and I hope it encourages people. But there's a whole lot of other people out there who are going through stuff. And so I started to think about this idea of having conversations like this and doing a podcast. And so I'd meet people and I'd say, can you tell me where was God in the midst of what you went through? How did you get through? And it became a conversation. It was like two people who got it. And as we had that conversation, I'd ask them questions. What helped you? And they'd tell me things and I'd go, wow, I hadn't thought about that. And I'd say, what didn't help you? Like, what did your friends or your family or your community do that was really good? What did they do that was not so good? And out of that's coming these principles that can be turned into practices for people. There's no answers for everybody, but as they listen, they go, oh, that's similar to my story, or that person's got a personality like me. And so this is becoming this incredibly rich archive of stories and conversations that I hope that people, wherever they are, and even those people particularly who have isolated themselves and go, I don't know who to talk to, I don't know who to share with, I feel like I'm alone. Suddenly they can hear someone share and go, you know what, I'm not alone. What I'm experiencing is what they experience, but there is a way through. And that's the hope that I hope comes out of this, because otherwise it's just a sharing of, wow, there's some really tough things you went through. And I go, yes, but there's hope in the middle of it. That I turned to God and he didn't fix everything the way I wanted him to, but he never left me. And he gave us this great hope that there's a way forward.
And now he's using your story to encourage so many other people. And I think too about, it shifts your view of kind of heaven, eternity, earth, when you have more and more people on the other side. How do you think about heaven now?
So I think there's a theology out there that doesn't really believe that there's a time to come when there's going to be perfection. And so we see people that are sick or dying, and we talk about them dying prematurely and their life's being cut short, and oh, how sad that is. And while there's definitely a sadness around the loss, Scripture says that for me to live is Christ, but to die is gain. And so we have this picture of hope into the future. So when my wife died, of course I didn't want her to die. The kids didn't want their mum to die. But we had this unbelievable hope that she was going to be with the Lord, and we're going to see her again. And so I think that picture of heaven is into a place in the future where there's going to be great hope and great joy and no suffering. And we look to that, but we live now with one eye there and one eye on earth. And so no matter what we're facing, we have a hope of what's to come. And so I believe in a miraculous God that can do the miraculous, can step in and fix things. But he doesn't always for some reason. And so we look to God for hope now and hope into the future.
It's one of the things I see in my work around the world. People are experiencing poverty and oppression, like their life isn't good here the way that it is for many of us in the West. Their eyes are firmly fixed on heaven. That's their hope, that day that Jesus will wipe every tear from their eye. And I know that day will come for you one day too, and your kids and your family. And so thanks for sharing so honestly about your story and the reflections that you had in the middle of it. I think it's really important that we have these conversations, because sometimes we don't, and then we're unprepared when hard things come our way.
Yeah.
So thanks so much.
No, it's been a pleasure.
And I just want to remind you, if you're watching, we have prayer lines that are open all day and all night. And if you are in that place, a lot of times when we're in pain, we pull back, we isolate ourselves. But you don't have to. And there is a resource available. You don't have to give your name. You don't have to give any of your information, but we will pray for you. We will not phone you. We will not harass you. It is 100% free. And there are the most wonderful people on the other end of that line. That number is 1-866-273-4444. I hope you give it a call, and I hope you remember what Stewart said so wise: you are never alone.